I call Alfred Naro.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. It's an honour to be able to stand this afternoon and speak on the Parental Leave and Employment Protection Amendment Bill. I, like others, also too want to commend Ms Moroney, who's not here right now, but just in her intent. I think the thing is that it's
Order.
For all MPs.
Can't refer to the absence of a member.
Sorry, Mr Speaker? Oh, yes, yes.
You can't refer to the absence of a member. Alfred Naro.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. I was trying to speak in acknowledgement of the member who's not here, but I do want to acknowledge. I want to acknowledge. Okay, the sponsor of the bill, Mr Speaker. Sponsor of the bill. You know, it's a bit of mean-spirited there. I am actually acknowledging the sponsor of the bill and her intent. That's what I want to do, because the intent is right. The intent is right. But Mr Speaker, it's of interest, I know, to all MPs that to be able to have their own private members' bill pulled out of the ballot and to be able to have it presented is important to us. The reason why it's important to us, and I know that later on tonight in the House, Tracy Martin's bill will be drawn. And the ability to be able to have your own bill drawn in a private members means that you can become the champion of a cause that's important to you. That's what private members' bills allow you to do, especially for those that are inside your community who will advocate for the importance of this bill. So I take nothing away from the sponsor of this bill and the importance that this issue of this bill tries to address around paid parental leave and employment protection. So with that, I acknowledge the intent, like all intents of all members that are honourable in this House. However, where we begin to differ is to the how. How do we ensure that we meet that demand and that need in that community? And so, Mr Speaker, I want to just make some comments because there have been other speakers in the House who previously talked about the previous Labor government and what they did when they introduced paid parental leave. And they talked about the extension of that paid parental leave. So I want to just go over those points. For instance, in 2012, it went from 10 weeks to 12 weeks. That was in 2012. In 2004, it went from 12 weeks to 14 weeks to what it is now currently, until its extension later on this year from 14 to 16 weeks, and in 2016 from 16 to 18 weeks. The reason I make mention of that, Mr Speaker, because those increments of change are the same increments of change that this government is also taking. The same increments of change by 2 weeks. So it is no different to what the Labor government did in their time to increase paid parental leave by 2 weeks in that period of 2 years, from 10 to 12, from 12 to 14, for us from 14 to 16, 16 to 18. So I want to make the point that we are making the same responsible judgments that we think are absolutely important as well. The other thing too, Mr Speaker, I want to make mention of is that it was talked about how that this government has been mean-spirited in this. It is my understanding that the Honourable Ruth Dyson, who was a minister at that time, was also presented with a brief about extending it even further, Mr Speaker, and in that time that was declined. So again, under a Labor government, there was not the intent to try and increase that even further, even though the petitions were made with the same issues that were related to parental care and responsibility. Again, under a Labor government, that was not increased as well. The other point that was made by the previous speaker, Mrs. Ardern, Mr. Speaker, was just in regards to the fact of a Labor government looking towards introducing bills that they felt were important to New Zealanders. Can I make mention to this? It was being talked about by the previous member that was here, the Honourable Tariana Turia, who talked about the issue of whānau ora. And I want to make mention of this in the House because it's not often talked about. But she made mention of this when she talked about whānau ora at a number of conferences, that it was under a Labor government, under the leadership of Helen Clark, where she introduced the idea. She talked about whānau ora being important for Māori and for their families. She talked about having a better way to meet their needs, to have self-determination so that they could be self-determining for themselves, for the hapu, for the iwi, and for the nation of Māori altogether. Mr Speaker, it was under a Labor government, under Helen Clark, in which she declined to even introduce this into conversation. And yet it's been under a national government in which whānau ora has not only been introduced, a commitment of over $137 million over 4 years, and now we have 3 commissioning agents, 2 for Māori, 1 for Pacific. Now that's the care and concern, that's the difference between a national government and a Labor government. that seeks to create continual dependency rather than saying that for those communities in particular that we can find a way to help support you. So, Mr. Speaker, I make mention of that again to talk about what this national government is doing to make a difference to families in our community. Mr. Speaker, let's talk about a little bit about this bill for Mr. Galloway, because he probably hasn't read the bill. So changes to the parental leave framework. So here's the differences that we're making. So we're going out and making a consultation process to talk about how we can change the bill in the appropriate way that's fiscally responsible, as been talked about before on the other side, and ensures that the changes that we make meet the differences and the different complexities of families and the differences they have in this day. We've had over 900 submissions that have already been put forward. And in that, the changes will allow for greater access and increased flexibility. So here are some of the key proposals that we're introducing that are really important, that we believe supersede the intent of the bill, but instead show what we're doing to support and care for families and children in New Zealand. The key proposals are parental leave payments extended to people in less regular work, such as seasonal and casual workers, those with more than one employer, and people who have recently changed jobs. We're extending parental leave payments to primary carers, providing for permanent foster care akin to adoption, such as home for life parents, people who have permanent guardianship, biological fathers and grandparents caring for grandchildren to be eligible, provided they meet the work test criteria. Employees being able to work limited hours, being able to work limited hours or days and keep up skills development during their parental leave period, allowing workers who have been with the employer for more than 6 months but less than a year to be entitled to some form of work and unpaid leave. Mr. Speaker, these are some of the things that we're doing that we believe are making a difference to the families, and we believe, Mr. Speaker, that's the way that we're showing that we care. The reasons why we oppose this part of the bill is that, Mr. Speaker, we are increasing paid parental leave from 14 to 16 to 18 weeks. But we're doing more than that. We're introducing a number of things. And I want to mention this one again because it will relate to Mr. Whāwhoi, who I remember in his speech talked about the importance there down in Porirua in the electorate of Mana, where he went to a pharmacy, and what he saw as a clear image was the number of prescriptions that were lined up. And he said this, how can we allow for these prescriptions that need to meet the medical needs and the health needs of our children in our community to be sitting on a bench on a shelf? What are we going to do about it? Mr. Whāwhoi, help us on its way. This is what we're doing about it. Free GP visits. So here's what we're doing, extending free GP visits and prescriptions for 2 children aged under 13 from July this year. So Mr. Whāwhoi, you can go along and you can know when you look into that pharmacy, those prescriptions will now be, they're free, Mr. Whāwhoi, they'll be free for them, they can access them in the pharmacy. In fact, I look forward to you, maybe you'll take me out there and we'll look at that pharmacy, we'll meet the pharmacist and talk to the people in Mana as well. The other things that we're doing is that, Mr. Speaker, that we're making homes warm and dry. Mr. Speaker, in the communities that I've begun to talk to constituents, we've talked about the importance of warm and dry homes. Over 300,000 homes that have been there, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, that we think those things are important, why they contribute to the care and concern for families that relate to the fact is that their needs are being met by this government. And Mr. Speaker, just lastly, I want to talk about offering free breakfast in schools, Mr. Speaker. That's absolutely important. Absolutely important so that parents know that these issues are being met by this government.
Order. The member is wide of the mark. I know that it is a small bill and there's been some licence, but you're getting well outside the scope of the bill, so ask the member to come back. It's about paid parental leave. That's what we're talking about. Alfred Naro.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Yes, it is about paid parental leave. It also, too, Mr. Speaker, is about how we care. We have had robust debate on the opposition, and I know you've given free licence for them to talk about all things that we're not doing. And so, Mr. Speaker, in my final comments, I want to say this. Again, as I said, and now that Ms Moroney is in here, I applaud the intent. However, I cannot agree with the approach. The government is making a difference. It is extending paid parental leave. We believe that this will meet the needs of our families and our communities. Mr. Speaker, on behalf of the government, we do not support this bill and we oppose this bill in its third reading.
I call Tracy Martin.
Kia ora, Mr. Speaker. Thank you very much.